Shalom. We at the Oriental Institute Museum, University of Chicago. First time here. Obviously, a wealth of information. We haven't even gone into the museum yet. We still looking at the book collection. So, praise the Most High. Most High will we could come in and present.
So one, UC Chicago, like Hawaiian stuff said, it's here to gather information.
So modern science would like us to believe that the native inhabitants of the Americas actually took the route of the Bering Straits to get to the Americas. So they came off the land bridge that exists between Russia and Alaska, and they came through there and through Canada and then down. But there's no historical or DNA proof of that journey. When you actually look at the DNA science, as well as archaeological remains, and the fact that there's people that are scattered along the whole eastern region that claim descendancy from Israel, as well as the account in 2nd Esdras, it becomes clear that the northern kingdom of Israel, what we believe to be the indigenous people of the Americas, came through this region here, came actually through this route. So you have the land of Israel and the antiquity that existed up and through this region. And obviously the northern kingdom existed in the northern part of Israel. So the northern kingdom, or the 10 tribes, so-called 10 tribes of Israel, when we were in Assyrian captivity, which is all throughout this region, here. Yeah, it says that, the 2nd Ezra says that we fled through the narrow passages of the Euphrates River. So when you look at the narrow passages of the Euphrates River is narrowest up and through here in this region. You see, it starts as almost like a stream, and then it continues down and empties out into the Gulf. So we actually entered on ships and boats on the narrow passages of the Euphrates River, came down. You see Euphrates River here, came down, followed it through, emptied out into the Persian Gulf. From the Persian Gulf, we continued our journey east, out into the Arabian Sea, continued east, which is why you see remnants of people such as the Kairat Jews, other so-called Jewish people that claim descendancy of Israel in India.
I think matter of fact, the Sardis, they call the cities people that's in India.
Yep, all the way through here. So it's clear that as we were passing through this region, there were points that we stopped, got off on our ships. Some stayed, some kept going. And if you follow this passage, it eventually empties out into the Pacific Sea. We continue to sail east through the Pacific Islands until you get to like Hawaii in that region, and then down, and we landed in Peru, which is where the oldest documents and fragments of archaeology exist in the Americas are all found in Peru. From Peru, we landed there, and we spread east and northward to inhabit the Caribbean, Mexico, and North America. That's the route that the ancient people came, sailed eastward. There was no Bering Straits. That's a myth. That's a lie that was developed by the Jesuit order under the priest Joseph de Acosta, who was a Jesuit priest that was set up to actually remove the notion that the native people of the Americas descended from Israel, because up until his time, that was the common knowledge of the day. Most people knew that we were from Israel, and that's found in numerous quotes and first-hand accounts from conquistadors and so on. But this is a great map, and once again, we're here at the Oriental Museum, so that's a quick fact for the day. So, shalom, y'all. All right, so about 2 years ago, we had the Exodus Memorial in New York, and break it down and trying to debunk the myth that exists about Mount Sinai. And in all actuality, modern day scholars will have you believe that the real Mount Sinai exists here, which is why they named it the Sinai Peninsula. It's actually a diversion tactic, because they want to keep people away from the real evidence of that which is known in Arabia as Jabal al-Lawz. Jabal al-Lawz is actually where the real Mount Sinai exists. And according to the scriptures, in the book of Galatians, I want to say, in Arabia, that the real Mount Sinai actually exists in Arabia. And people debate what the real geographical lines of Arabia actually were at that time when it was written. But in any authoritative source, scholarly source that you look at, it'll tell you that the real Mount Sinai exists somewhere here within this region. This has been documented by many explorers. One guy whose name is slipping my mind. You know, we don't have our resources in front of us, but I believe the presentation is online. But when we fled, when the children of Israel fled, mind you, we were living in this region up here. This is actually the land of Goshen. Was in the north of Israel, or really the south of Egypt, because the Nile River flows opposite. So this, even though it's northern, it's actually the southern region of Egypt. And so our people fled from this area right around here, and we came into here. We walked across the land, boom, and then we crossed the Red Sea here. The land of Midian was here, and it actually makes perfect sense because when you look at how the nation of Israel entered the land of Israel, we had to go through the Moabites, we had to go through the Edomites in order to cross into Israel. That's all documented in the books of Numbers and so on. So when you look at the land of Edom in antiquity where it existed, it was down here in this region right here. So we actually fled into the land of Midian, which is in this area of Arabia, and then went northward into Israel when we finally inhabited the land.
It's a lot, yeah. I just want to, I got the scripture for you. This is Galatians 4:25. It says, for this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia,
Right.
and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is and is the bondage with her children. So,
Right. And actually, when you look into the Blue Letter Bible, it gives an in-depth definition, and I believe and even in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it'll tell you that Arabia, the context of Arabia, the geographical lines of Arabia, it says east of the Sinai Peninsula. So that gives you an understanding of where that really exists.
Persian. Don't do it. So Persia is the Edomite.
So all of the Kemetic people that don't believe in the Bible, why they use biblical terminology to define time?
Break that down too. I got some more stuff we're gonna break down as far as Persia. The line of Persia talks about Elamite periods.
Right.
Middle Elamite, Old Elamite. Then you know that Elam or whatever are the Persians of the Bible. The Medo-Persians, yeah. So
Hittite. Okay, we can see here, right? You're talking about the Neo-Assyrian period between 934 and 612 BC, which coincides with the time the Northern Kingdom was in captivity to the Assyrians. This is what is known as the Lamassu Griffith, and there's an exact artifact of this in gold, pure gold, that was found in South America, either Bolivia or Peru, I forget. We're gonna bring that out in this period. So, if the native inhabitants of those lands did not come from the Northern Kingdom of Israel, then how were artifacts from the Assyrian captivity found? These are questions that have to be answered. question for all of the scholars that want to debunk the fact that the native people of the Americas are descended from the lost tribes of Israel. Why was this artifact found in South America in pure gold, the Lamassu, which is a known Assyrian deity? If we were not in Assyrian captivity prior to coming here, then how was this found? You can see clearly the features on these people between the noses and their hair in such a curly, quote unquote, kinky fashion, that these had to be people of Negroid descent, Negroid features. You see the fringes, they got the fringes on the bottom, tassels. This is it right here, man.
So this is an obelisk from King Solomon III, and I don't know if you can get this, Ariel, but it says the kneeling king shown second from the top is identified as Ahu of the house of Hamramni, already known from the Old Testament as Jehu, a king of Israel in the mid-9th century BC. And it's right here. It's Jehu.
Clearly a black man.
Clearly. So as you can see, his fringes right here. This is Jehu, the one kneeling down, as we just saw, with fringes, and he has a nappy beard, as you can see, his beard around here.
Yep. And this artifact from Assyrian captivity was also found in South America. That symbol right there. Yep. He don't look black, bro. Look at his hair, man. He almost look like he got box braids or something like that, right? Look at that.
With open hands.
And a garment.
Shalom, Israel. So this particular ancient structure right here is the Sennacherib prism. All right, Sennacherib, I guess, was one of the kings at the time of 704 BC of Assyria, and this prism actually goes into an account of how the military occupation defeated King Hezekiah. All right, and it boasts about them conquering King Hezekiah. If you can read this paragraph right here, it says, on this prism, the Sennacherib boasts of complete victory over Hezekiah. However, the story of this siege is also told in the Old Testament and perhaps by Herodotus, all right, the Greek historian, because if anybody knows, when we did the Egypt on trial, Herodotus was one of those people that were referred to as a Greek, sort of that Greek historian. Especially when we talk about the Hellenistic period. But both of these sources claim that Sennacherib retreated from the walls of the city and his forces succumbed to a plague. So this is, written in cuneiform, so obviously we can't read it. It's in cuneiform, but this is an ancient structure kind of proving that indeed they have ancient stories about, if you believe in the ancient Medo-Persia period or the Assyrian period, then obviously the Bible must be true because they have their sources even in their specific artifacts. So how can the scriptures not be true? So that's what I'm saying. We really got to start going to museums, going to different places where artifacts are actually shown backing up the scriptures, and compared it with the stories that we read, because we can prove that nobody can debunk this. This is a first-hand source right here. We had a museum. So this is primary sources for those who want to prove scholarship and go through these all type of gateways or whatnot. This is it right here. So, I mean, it's a museum telling you this. So, Israel rise.
For all those that say we don't speak real Hebrew, they say we use a fake dialect or language, just take a look at what was used here. It's the ancient Paleo-Hebrew script. Check it out, man. Check it out, man. What's up? Look at that, man. That's what we use. Yep.
So explain what that means to like the layman out there.
So the Hebrew that you see more times than not in today's society is known as the modern Hebrew, which was influenced by the Masoretes. It's claimed to have been started with Ezra. It says that, I guess myth has it that he saw it in the fire or something when he had a vision and he created a new script. But it uses vowel points and different things that we don't really utilize, because when you look at the ancient Hebrew, there is no points or accents or things of that nature. It's just separated by periods. Each word is separated by dots. See? So we often refer to this, and actually when you look at ancient Israelite artifacts, a lot of times this is the script that we use. See? So we try to go back to the ancient, because that's our forefathers. Before there was injections into our culture, and people superimpose themselves into the Israelite culture. Yeah, so this is the Moabite stone, or the Meshe Stela, and it was written to basically showcase Moab's victory over Israel. It's from the Iron Bronze Age, so it goes back to like the 9th century BC. So all those doubters that the ancient Israel actually existed, you need not to look any further than this right here. I mean, if we were an ancient people, then why are we mentioned in a tablet like this that goes back to the 9th century BC?
The stamp seal. All ancient Paleo Hebrew. Man.
Original copies of books of the Hebrew Bible.